Hey guys, it's Coach Jared and Coach Matt here with episode 1 of the Richmond Elite Podcast.
Yeah, this is legit now. Super legit now.
So, we're going to start trying to do this on a weekly basis. So, stay tuned for more episodes like this. But today, we're just going to kind of do an introduction between me and Coach Matt, kind of in case you don't know us and don't know as much about our background. We're going to go through and talk a little bit about what we used to do, how we got started in this, and then we're going to go through the different coaches that we've had over the years and kind of the influence that they've had on our coaching styles, and talk about a little bit like how we came to develop our own like unique styles through our past experiences. So for me, most people know I was an Olympic weightlifter in college, and then after college, did that at a pretty high level. Won a few national medals over the years, but a lot of people don't realize that like I've been doing athletics my whole career, and I started out, playing all the sports as a kid. So, my main sport was basketball, but I played baseball, played football, played golf. I played all the sports. So, anyways, when I got into high school, I had to kind of choose between football and golf, and my main sport at the time was basketball. So I decided to play golf, and kind of stay healthy for basketball. And also, I loved playing golf. My dad was an avid golfer, so we played a lot of golf growing up. So, anyways, in high school, I played basketball, baseball, golf. Then when I got into college, I decided I wasn't going to pursue college sports. Wanted to go to a big Division I university, and I wasn't going to be able to play at that level in basketball. So I decided I needed to do something competitively, and I got into CrossFit. And I did that at a pretty high level for a few years. And then one day, the best part of my CrossFit career was always my weightlifting. So the snatch, clean and jerk, my strength levels were always kind of superior to a lot of the other guys, where maybe my cardiovascular level was not quite up to par. So I looked at some of the numbers that I needed to hit to qualify for some of the national meets in weightlifting, and I realized that like they were attainable. Basically, I could hit those numbers. So I signed up for a weightlifting meet. And in my first meet ever, I qualified for what's called the American Open. Now it's called the American Open Finals because they have different events, but it's essentially the second biggest meet in the country. So I qualified for the American Open, and I went down a couple months later, competed in the American Open, and when I was in the American Open, I used that total, and I was able to qualify for the national championships. And so then I went, and this whole time that I'm doing weightlifting, I figured, I would probably go back to CrossFit. I just wanted to kind of give it a shot. But then after I qualified for nationals, I was like, I'll give this a chance, and I'll just do weightlifting up until nationals. So a few more months go by, go and compete at nationals, and had a pretty good finish there for my first nationals. And that was kind of when people were in my ear and just like, dude, you need to just kind of stick to this sport. So that was kind of when I made the decision that I was just going to try to pursue weightlifting, and kind of the rest is history. I had a few good years where I was winning some national medals, trying to, really close to making some international teams. I was the Pan American alternate in 2018, and just, had some injuries along the way, started getting older, had life come up, and I decided I was going to open up a gym and started coaching, and that really took over my life. But that's just, I want to give my athletic background prior to coaching. So now we'll let Coach Matt talk about his athletic
Yeah, absolutely.
background.
So kind of the same thing as you. I mean, I was in sports my whole life and played sports my whole life. Even if I wasn't good at them, I'd still try them, just because that's how I was. And I was ultra competitive my whole life because of that. But wrestled since the age of 3. Basically was my main sport my whole life. Played baseball, travel baseball my whole life as well. Actually, I hated wrestling my whole life. Like, would try to quit every single year, and would try to. I remember, never forget, one year at a tournament at Assumption, I tried calling a taxi. I was like 8 years old, and I'm like, Mom, I'm not wrestling. And she's like, no, you are wrestling today. We were at the tournament. This is at Assumption. Like, everybody's here. Your family's here to watch you. Your friends are here to watch you. I'm like, I'm not doing it. She's like, well, I'm not taking you home. So I had her phone. And I was Googling taxi services to call to leave my wrestling tournament. So hated wrestling my whole life, but ended up being the best thing for me. And got to high school after playing like travel baseball and doing all this wrestling competitions my whole life. And kind of the same thing, had to pick. Did I want to be a state champion in wrestling and kind of have that individual feeling, or did I want to, put my trust in a team and do a team aspect sport and kind of put my effort towards that? So I decided to do wrestling, and for me, I was tiny, right? So I was 70 pounds my freshman year of high school, so I wasn't really hitting bombs on the baseball field or throwing the ball very far.
I think I was 70 pounds when I was like 5.
It's crazy, right? Like, I look back at myself, I'm like, man, I would have bullied myself.
Now you weigh almost double that.
I know, right? And like, I'm still not a big guy by any means, but it's like, I feel giant compared to my family now. But so I ended up quitting baseball, decided I wanted to kind of pursue wrestling and kind of stick with wrestling instead. And very grateful I did so. Wrestled 4 years at Assumption, was a state champion there, and then went to Loras College in Dubuque, wrestled for the #1 team in D3, was a 4-year starter there, graduated from there in 2020. And started coaching at the collegiate level right after that. So a little bit of an athletic background, was just wrestling my whole life, and it got me to kind of where I'm at right now with coaching as well, because I started coaching wrestling right outside of graduation, and then kind of led me back to home in Davenport and coaching now. So
yeah, so basically kind of what we're getting at is like coaching is kind of like, in our DNA, right? Mm-hmm. It's like we've been doing this a really long time, whether he's been coaching wrestling. I actually started coaching CrossFit when I was doing CrossFit when I was 19. I coached CrossFit for like 5 years before I opened up my gym. The whole time I was also coaching weightlifting, or not the whole time, but most of that time I was going around to different CrossFit gyms, and I would do like a barbell club where we would meet on like Sundays and or some weekend day, and I would teach the snatch and clean and jerk and some of the strength movements to the classes. So, yeah, I've been coaching a really long time. Matt's been coaching a really long time. So I think the next thing kind of we want to talk about is like, where we developed our coaching influence. Mm-hmm. So for me, my dad was my coach my whole life. Like for like growing up, he coached, he coached basketball up through high school, but he coached basketball. He coached my, Pee-wee, like baseball, Little League baseball. He coached, soccer. I played soccer. I played flag football.
He coached,
he coached me in all that stuff. So, but his love, was definitely basketball and golf. And so, he built like a basketball court, like a shed, a garage for us to literally play basketball in. And we would go out and practice like, every night, right? We play one-on-one all the time. So he was my first influence. And, when I'm coaching now, I can really see like a lot of the, at the time, man, me and him used to butt heads all the time, right? But I see a lot of his like influence when I coach. Like he's goofy, but like, super serious at times, and really was a big proponent of developing skills. So when you play like a team sport, a lot of coaches, I kind of think of coaches in two ways. There's like skill coaches, and then there's like X's and O's, right? Like there's a coach that like isn't going to develop the athlete, right? They're not really focused on athlete development. They're more focused on like taking the athletes that they have and then trying to, use them in the best way possible, but they're not really going to like teach you how to shoot, right? They're not gonna, and my dad was not that. He was more of like a skills coach. He wanted to like, and I think that's probably because he's working with younger athletes, right? And we work with a lot of youth athletes. But anyways, we have to like, we can't just like tell them what to do. We have to teach them the skills. So anyways, my dad really helped me with that. Then when I kind of moved into CrossFit in college, I was self-coached for a really long time. I mean, I would do so much research. I mean, you can ask my wife. I just, was eat, sleep, and breathing, anything fitness, read tons of research, just watched every YouTube video, read every article that I could get my hands on. And I coached myself for, about the next 3 to 4 years. Even the start of my weightlifting career where I was self-coached, before I found my first coach, Lou DeMarco. And so Lou was, a coach on the 1996 Olympic team. And I mean, he's when I started working with Lou, I think he was like 80 years old. So really old, but super just like motivational. So we use like the saying like at the gym, like whatever it takes. That's kind of one of our slogans. So that's from him. So if you ever watch like some of my old weightlifting videos, like he would just yell at me as I was going up on stage. He'd be like, just do whatever it takes, you know, like, cause the point was at the time, like your training's over. Like you can't be thinking up on stage.
Everything's
right?
done. Yeah.
It's
all
just
the work's
like,
done.
I don't care what it looks like now at this point. You just do whatever it takes. Right.
Yep.
And I think a lot of athletes, they try to overthink things. So Lou was not he was not so much a skills coach, like a weightlifting coach in that way. He was more less technique and more just like motivational.
Yeah, for sure.
More mindset, you know, more of like training program, like the routine, but not necessarily like the technique of snatch, clean, jerk.
Yeah.
Then I was coached under Max Ada, who was the Juggernaut Training Systems head coach at the time. Max is the opposite of that. I would say Max is way more, and he would tell you too, like way less motivational, but really technical, right? Really technical. And I had to, like, he was more like, I had to really go back and think about a lot of the things that I was doing. So, you know, and I worked with him for a couple of years, and like, I just think it was really cool because I've been able to balance like all of the different coaches that I've had and take. Now I had some coaches in high school too, like for, you know, basketball and golf and, baseball, and honestly I would say I've generally had bad experiences with my high school coaches. So I feel like they were able to teach me how not to coach. Very punitive, you know, like we would run as punishment and like all that, like just all the time. And I just didn't want to be there a lot of the times. Like I dreaded like the practice, even though I was like, you know, I love the sport of basketball and I love the sport of golf and you know, baseball and all those things, but I just didn't want to be there because I didn't really understand like why we're doing the things we're doing. Right. And so I made it a point that where when we coach, it's really important for us to, you know, a lot of the things we do suck, right? Like when we run, it sucks, right? Like we do things that suck and they're hard. But if you explain to the athlete why you're doing them, and explain to them like we're doing this to get you better, right? And they're able to understand that and see the rewards from that, then they're not going to hate you because of it, right? Definitely. And so anyways, that's kind of my recap on like how I developed my coaching strategy. I'll kind of let Matt go through his now.
Yeah, it's a point off of that too, which I always think is like super interesting, is like, I can't remember where exactly I saw it, but it said one of the hardest things for athletes is like adapting to each coach that they have. Like, cause if you think about how many like coaches kids have now, right? Like we see kids, but then like their hitting coach and then their pitching coach. And then, you know, they have all these like certain coaches for each position or for each thing, right? It's like the hardest thing for them, I'm sure, is to have one coach that acts like a certain way. And then like they maybe go to someone else the next hour and it's completely different, right? So it's like interesting to see, like I'd almost want to like ask athletes how different it is for them, especially at a young age, right? Like for right now, for us, it seems like, oh, you just kind of go and do your thing. But for them, it like kind of freaks them out to go to one session compared to another, right? But kind of the same thing though as Jared. It's just I had a lot of good coaches growing up, like a lot of elite coaches that I feel like I was able to benefit from right away, just because they kind of instilled like a lifestyle from a young age to me almost. And it started with, my dad was never really my coach. He was always there and always took me to practices, but it was my older brother. And it was the same thing, kind of where I never at first really understood why, like a lot of the stuff that we were doing. And most of the time, you know, being my older brother, it was just like beating the crap out of me, like in wrestling. And I would be the same way where like I would come home distraught, like crying and being like, I hate Andrew so much because he just will not let me win. And my mom would like plead, like, please let him win one time just so he can be happy. And he'd be like, no, I'm not going to let him win ever.
So quickly, like me and my dad had this thing where we would play one-on-one and it was infrequent. Like we wouldn't do it that often. It was like, it felt like we did it when I think he felt like I got a little bit better. Yeah. So like, okay, hey, time to retest, right? For sure. Like it's kind of like when we do our assessments and stuff. But anyways, like his deal was every time you beat me in one-on-one, I think we started with like $5 or $10. And it was like, every time you beat me, the pot doubles.
That's awesome.
Right.
That's awesome.
But what was funny about it was when I was younger, I would beat him sometimes. Right. Like when I was like 8 years old, 10 years old. And I'm like, you know, I'm up to $20, right? I'm up to $40. Well, one, my dad was a tightwad in certain ways. When it came to us kids, he wasn't. But it was funny because I started thinking about this. I thought about this later in life. I don't know how my brain didn't figure it out earlier, but it was like he was getting older as I was getting older. So he was getting worse essentially,
Yeah.
right? And as I was getting better. And then I stopped winning.
Weird.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, like I figured out later, like he was letting me win at the beginning, and then he wasn't letting me win. But I'm
Yeah.
like, that's weird. I'm like, Dad, I've been stuck on $100, right?
Forever.
For like, I've been stuck on this for like 2 years. But yeah, he was so competitive, and like, I remember the same thing. I'd go in every time, and I'd say, Dad cheated. You know, he was fouling me, or he was calling fouls or whatever, and yelling at my mom and telling her like he cheated. He just doesn't want to give me my money.
Awesome. That's exactly how it was too. It's the exact same thing. So it's like that was, you know, the start of my kind of like my wrestling career. And then growing up, I had, you know, like the club scene coaches at Young Guns were national champions and stuff like that. And then as I got into high school, same thing. I had a national champion as a head coach that went to Iowa as well, Pete Bush. And, you know, a lot of times like we were talking about in high school level sports, it's you don't get that kind of like coaching experience, especially, or at least that competition experience at a D1 level.
Right.
So getting that and having assistant coaches, I think all 4 of our assistant coaches wrestled at the D1 level at Assumption as well. So it was nice having that around at like a high school level, because right now we see a lot of the times when athletes come in here from high school, it's like we kind of question a lot of their training stuff, right? So it was nice to kind of have a structure to where I knew I was doing the right things to get me to the next level, because I wasn't really necessarily focused on like how well I can do in high school, and that's it. Like my end goal was always college wrestling. So it was nice that I was getting set up for the future that way. And then at Loris, when I was up there, Trevor Kittleson, my assistant coach, and John O'Reilly were 2 guys that really kind of changed the game for me. And it was the same thing as like the mindset side of things. So I'd always get so annoyed with Coach Kittleson because everything was a choice. That's all he said, everything. I could be like, man, my head hurts today. Oh, that's a choice. A headache's a choice. And it's like so annoying, right? And it's like, it's not though, because my head hurts really bad right now. Like I'm trying to tell myself it doesn't hurt. But now when I'm coaching, I'm like, there's people complaining about things that maybe aren't necessarily that big of a deal. And I'm like, all right, but if that was just a choice in your head, like if you decided not to let that affect you, then it probably wouldn't affect you, right? So the mindset side of things really came in college for me, and it clicked for me in college a lot more. And I would say that that's where I got most of my coaching ability is from college, just because you're kind of on your own, you're kind of self-taught at the same time as you're getting guidance from these people that were, you know, really high level athletes at some point in their career. So I think that's where I took majority of it. And like now I feel like I'm very much so a mindset side coach, where I'm like, okay, based on how you feel as an athlete, that's how you'll perform, and that's how much work you'll put into your workouts and everything like that.
Yeah,
so,
you're definitely a you're definitely a mindset coach.
yeah,
right?
and I'm mindset athlete too. I'm the same way. If I don't feel 100% up here, sometimes I can like feel that in my workouts, which is bad sometimes, right? But it's a hard battle for a lot of athletes too.
Right.
So.
It's funny because like it's the same. Like we've talked about how I said I had a coach that was more of like a mindset coach, right? More motivational. Then I had coaches more technical, right? And I think we have that similarly at the gym. Like we have a few different coaches, and like some are a little bit more rah-rah, some are a little bit more like, just we're not gonna like you. I don't think you're rah-rah. I think you're more like just like talk like this, but then go through some like deep kind of conversations that you have to have with the athlete, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that's like I think the best thing I think at least here for coaches is just like the relationship building that we are able to do with our athletes, right? And it's kind of just cool to see how it goes in different ways, like you said, right? So I don't connect to an athlete maybe the same way that you do or that Reese does or whoever, but it's just cool that all 3 separate kind of ways of coaching are still building relationships with athletes in different ways. And you can kind of see it when they come in, they might talk to you differently than they talk to me. And it's like, that's cool to see still, you know what I mean?
Just and we want them to hit each, because like the mindset's important.
Mm-hmm.
The skills like are important, right? The motivational side of things is important. Like there's days where like you don't want to work, right? And you need some rah-rah, like you need that, right?
Definitely.
Like, then there's days where it's like, dude, rah-rah's annoying. Like I'm gonna work. Like you don't need to like do that. Like it's all right.
Yeah,
right?
And what's nice for us is like having those coaches and those experiences already in our athletic careers. It's like we can kind of now read athletes a little bit more when they come in, right? Like for me, at least, that first initial conversation with every athlete, I'm like, okay, they're either in a good mood or they're like in a horrible mood, right?
Yeah.
So it's nice for us to kind of be able to pick that up, because I feel like sometimes coaches don't know those like cues, and then they just like
Yep.
try to force things down kids' throats, and they're like completely shutting down the entire time, right?
And that's
So,
like the benefit of us where we work with kids either like on a one-on-one basis or like a semi-private, like up to 5 athlete basis. Like we're able to develop that relationship with each athlete, and then we're also able to have conversations, like deeper conversations with each athlete, and help them grow not only as an athlete but as a person. And I think it shows with like the retention that we have is like, athletes want to be here. What I always tell parents is like, basketball's fun, baseball's fun, wrestling, I don't know.
wrestling's not fun.
But like volleyball is fun. Like all those sports are like inherently fun to play. So the team coach that you have for that, like your high school coach, might not have to develop that much of a relationship with you for you to want to be there, because you want to play that sport because it's fun, right? Like me, like I said, I didn't have the best relationship with my high school coaches, but I wanted to play basketball. I loved it, right? Where it's like training is not always fun, right? Like it's a lot of hard work, and there are times where it's super fun, right? Like hitting PRs is like one of the best things, but like I would say most days, like not everything's really fun, right? And that's the point. But it's our job to make it as enjoyable as we can for the athletes, and that's going to keep them coming back. And at the end of the day, consistency, we know, is like the name of the game, right? Like I'd rather have an athlete that shows up and gives me 75% every single day than a kid that shows up only every so often, right? And he gives me 100% every time, right? So I think it's like we've realized that the balance has to be there behind like being motivational, getting on the athlete when needed, right? Like getting after him a little bit, and like and putting them in their place when needed. But then also like at the end of the day, like we can, since we were relatively young, I would say, right? Maybe not me so much, but like we're able to relate to them a little bit more and say like, hey, we were in your shoes not that long ago. I remember what it's like to be your age. I remember your mindset. And I think when you say things like, hey, look, like, trust me. So I had a girl the other day where, the bar on her back hurt, right? Like the first time she did a squat with like a barbell on her back, it didn't feel very good, right? And everybody can relate to that. And I think it's important to remember to tell the athlete that, hey, I remember the first time that I squatted with a bar on my back and it hurt my back a lot too. It's just part of the process. I promise you won't be like this forever. But I was in the same shoes as you. You're not unique in that aspect, right? And I think reassuring the athlete of that in a lot of cases, like, oh, he went through this too. Like everybody goes through this. Yeah. I think that helps.
Yeah. I think like one thing that I always say, especially when like an athlete, like, if you're like, all right, we got, split squats today, and they're like, oh man, like they're all upset. It's like, listen, I'm not ever going to make you do something that I already haven't done myself. Right. So like, a lot of times my biggest pet peeve with like coaches that I've had bad experiences with is like the guy that stands off to the side and screams at you to do sprints or screams at you to do something, and they're not like ever doing it themselves.
They're not in the trenches, right?
Right.
So we train together 3 times a week, right? So we train together, all coaches train together Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings. And we all like, we're all still getting after it at some point. And it's the same thing. It's like, we're never going to have you do an exercise that we've never done that we can't relate to you on. It's like split squats. They suck. I literally tell them, I know it sucks, man. I know it sucks, but it's going to help you, right? It's going to make you faster, right? I try, but again, explaining to them that that it sucks. Right. But it's good for you.
It's that comfortability for them. Like, oh, okay, somebody else has gone through this, right? Then I can go through it. But it's like, it's crazy that, all these hard things that they're doing, as soon as they get the results from it, right? It's like, they don't even remember how hard it was anymore, right? It's like, that's another thing I always say. It's just, you go through the sucky stuff now, but when you're winning, you're not going to be like, oh, I remember doing, 8 reps of split squat each leg, really, really heavy weight. It's like, no, you're going to be like, wow, I really like winning. And I translate that because I go to the gym and I'm consistent in the gym, and now I get my results. So it's like, it's funny because it's a process. They start very, very like, oh man, I can't believe I have to do this, to like, oh man, I want to do this because it helps me win. Right.
So yeah, today we just really wanted to kind of talk about, give backgrounds on us athletically, our coaching backgrounds, kind of how we developed our own personal styles, and then just kind of like, talk a little bit about how we are able to bounce ideas off each other and work together as a team of coaches, so that athletes can work with any of our coaches and feel comfortable and get like a unique experience each time that's super valuable. So I think that's it for
Yeah.
today. We'll see you in episode 2.
Let's do it.